dive right in. So welcome, everybody. We appreciate it. I'm Erin Welton. I'm with Agility, and I'm the owner of Agility. We're a company that really focuses on helping thousands of clients with their communications. And we felt like, since there's a lot of things going on today, most of us work for companies or run companies that, we're looking to work on reducing expenses, right? We want to save jobs. We want to preserve our companies. So today we're really going to focus on, what are some of those ideas to help reduce expenses. And I've invited a special guest today. His name is Dennis. He's a SIP consultant. I'm going to let him introduce himself. We both have some fun facts that we want to share with you. And I guess to start out, my fun fact is essentially, this is my slogan in life, and hopefully you can see this. It says, live with aloha. And if you guys have, and obviously aloha is hello and goodbye in Hawaiian. So if you've been to Hawaii, it's kind of cool, right? Aloha, you've heard it, you've said it. But it's also a spirit. So the aloha spirit is an embodiment of love and respect for every human. And I know times are really tough. So this is actually something that gives me inspiration every day. I have it on my desktop. Because it's just a special feeling, and especially when times are hard, but every day we should have the aloha spirit. You want to have love and respect for people, and that's what really matters. And when you see times like today, that's when, it really comes out in the communities. One of the things that's really happening in our community, in our neighborhood, and I don't know if it's happening in yours, but I want to share it with you, is there's been some full moons lately, and so what folks are doing where I live is they're howling every night at 8 p.m. So it's kind of cool. It's basically a thank you for all the folks that are out there every day on the front lines, healthcare workers. So thank you for the folks that are in the grocery stores and people delivering the mail, and all the folks every day that keep us safe and keep our community, humming along while we ride this out. So anyhow, that's a little fun fact about me. Dennis, I will hand it to you. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself and maybe a fun fact as well.
Absolutely. Appreciate the warm welcome. So like Erin mentioned, my name is Dennis Ma. I am a SIP consultant, kind of specializing with folks looking to shift more of their communications infrastructure towards cloud-based UCaaS or CCaaS solutions. I currently work for a company called Bandwidth, where we specialize in providing carrier-grade and commercial-grade communications infrastructure and pipe on the back end. So in terms of my fun fact, prior to the last 2 years of telecom, and telecom is definitely a very deep, dark hole, I actually spent about 3 years as a Teach for America Corps member in Eastern North Carolina. And taught a variety of subjects stemming from physical science, so chemistry, physics, biology, all the way to my favorite, which was actually 10th grade English. So got to teach Shakespeare to a bunch of kids. It's definitely been an interesting transition, moving from the classroom to telecommunications, but had a great time in the industry so far. I've learned a ton and definitely lived for conversations like this.
Excellent. Well, we're glad you're here. I know some people have jumped into the meeting. Just so you know, we are in lecture mode, so we can't hear you. We did that on purpose just so we don't have any background noise. So if you have questions, there's a little chat window, and you can see it there at the bottom. It says public chat. Just go ahead and enter a message there. If you have a question, we don't want you to wait till the end. If you have a question or you just got a thought or you're thinking about something, chat, put it in the public message. We sit on a lot of these webinars lately. We always have, right, in our industry. And we want this to be different than just a PowerPoint slide deck that we go through and could potentially bore you. So we want this to be exciting. We want you guys to be involved. So we're going to be talking about a bunch of stuff. How we're going to structure it really is in two parts. The first part is reducing costs, right? We all get these cryptic telephone bills, and we need some ideas on how to reduce those costs. And there's some solution and ideas we're going to discuss with you today in part one. Part two of this session is going to be very important today. We're all shelters in place. People are working at home. So we're going to really focus on remote users. How do you set them up, not only to be able to function in your environment, being able to make and receive phone calls, but how do you use rooms like we're in today? So we've got some really great ideas to share with you in part two, focused on basically remote worker, what are the tools they need, the apps they need, and how do they collaborate in the new world. And so today's format is going to be a little bit different than you may have experienced before, but hopefully it's more entertaining and more engaging to you. Dennis and I are going to really focus on telling stories. We work with hundreds of clients. The solutions that we're talking to you today have been implemented for years. We want to tell stories. We want to have open Q&A. I'm going to be asking him questions. He may be asking me questions. And at the end of it, our goal is you come away with some really great ideas to make your company stronger and also reduce the overall cost that you're paying on a monthly basis. So, and just a real quick plug for Agility, we've got teams of people, and I think most of you know us, that come in and help you navigate these solutions with ideas and analysis. So if any of these things sound interesting to you, just send us a note, and we'd be glad to help you in any way we can. So I'm going to start with part one, and this is essentially just painting the picture. I think most of us are in the same boat. We've got, in our personal life, we've got these expenses, and most of you have had cable or maybe used to have cable, and it seems to be that bill keeps growing, right? It used to be $100 a month, and now it's $200 a month or $220, and it's getting really expensive. And it's just one of those things where you pay it every month, but you're like, hey, is there a better way? And some of you may have found that better way by just having internet and using different subscription services, right? And so that kind of model is what we're going to be talking about today for your telecom expense. So if you take that same analogy and you look at your bills that come in for telecom, most of you today get some sort of telecom bill, right, for your phone lines. Typically, it's really, really cryptic, hard to understand. I've been doing this for 25 years, and I still can't read half the bills I see. We actually have a team of people here at Agility that read those for us and decipher it and put it into analysis. So if you need help with that, let us know. But I know you guys are probably in that same boat where you're getting some cryptic bill. It's got a lot of taxes and fees. It's usually a large expense. And you may be wondering, is there a better way? So we've invited Dennis to join us today because he's got some different options that can help us. I know you've mentioned, you've heard this word SIP, and then talking to Dennis, he said, SIP is magic. So can you help us understand, or help the audience understand, Dennis, what options exist to deal with this cryptic, expensive telecom bill? What have you seen people do, and maybe explain a little bit more about SIP and why you feel like it's magic?
Yep, and SIP, just to kind of expand upon that, stands for Session Initiation Protocol. It is the packetizing of voice that allows you to essentially place inbound and receive inbound and place outbound calls over your internet connection. I would say in brief, SIP is magical for a couple very brief reasons. Number one, it's incredibly scalable. Number two, it's incredibly flexible. And by consequence, coupled with that scalability and flexibility, allows you guys to set up a communication solution that is actually commensurate to what you guys will actually use, and by consequence will then lead to more accurate usage-based billing. That's the big high-level gist of why a lot of folks choose to move to SIP, particularly moving from older, more dedicated circuit-based approaches like PRI. So
obviously, one of the themes of today is, reducing cost. I mean, how SIP sounds great, but how does that help us reduce or eliminate this expensive phone bill that we're getting every month?
Yeah, so I can easily tell a pretty a sample story of what to kind of expect when you're looking to move from more legacy-based infrastructure like traditional circuiting to the public service telephone network like PRI over something that is more internet-based like SIP. So in the past, typically when small, medium-sized businesses, let's paint the picture, let's say something with a contact center, or perhaps, you guys are involved in business process outsourcing, so you might do inbound answering services on behalf of other enterprise-level entities. Typically, the process of setting up your phone circuits was limited to packages of 23 circuits, let's say for a PRI. So regardless of the size of your company, let's say you're starting at the beginning, headcount kind of fluctuates either up or down depending on seasonality. Typically, in most cases, when you're looking to establish the amount of concurrent call paths that you need, we like to think in the SIP world that you'll give it a 1-to-3 or a 1-to-2 ratio. So let's say you have a 50-person shop, 50 extensions, you need to buy yourself a PRI circuit. That physical circuit typically on a month-to-month basis is $500 of initial upfront expenses, and that's monthly recurring. In most cases, that doesn't include any form of redundancy. So in those cases, if you guys want to have a backup in case that circuit goes down, you'll need to shell out an additional $500 to have the additional redundancy there. The benefit of immediately going to SIP is it allows you guys to buy in bundles the amount of concurrency and phone numbers that you need based on what you have currently, and also allows you to dynamically respond to the seasonality as well. Typically, the process of installing another physical circuit is usually a work order that takes anywhere between 3 to 4 weeks to fulfill, requires a specialist to come on site. It's very, very premise limited. Whereas if you guys are looking to go for more of a SIP-based model, instead of having to buy extra channels or extra concurrency that you don't need, you can instead tailor the amount of concurrency that you need for what you guys are currently seeing, and kind of do it through your service provider in a process that may take the span of a week at most, maybe even hours, rather than something that would require you to proactively plan and also allocate additional operating expenses. So in some cases, for that 50-person shop, if they find that, seasonally they need to add an additional 20 headcount to account for increased inbound call traffic, say during December, they might say that they might only need 25 to 30 call paths. That'd be the process of setting up those trunks through a SIP-based provider rather than buying an additional PRI and spending unnecessary expenses.
So I guess what I'm hearing you, because I think a lot of people on this call probably have, a PRI, for sure, and some analog lines, which, that's outdated technology, right? That would be, I always like analogies. Let's like me having a CD player, right? When today you can stream music, right, for a low monthly fee. So I think what you're telling the audience is, perhaps they're on an outdated technology that's costing them a lot of this money recurring. If they move to SIP, it's more of a consumption model. You just get what you need, right? So instead of having a physical card and having to have 23 channels and locked into all this expense with SIP and this IP traffic, as you guys know, things across networks are just easier, right? So you can scale up and scale down at will, right? If one month you need 10 SIP trunks for 10 simultaneous inbound, outbound calls, you have it. The next month, if it's 3 times that, you just pay for what you need. So it's more of that subscription consumption model. I know there's folks on this call that have already moved to SIP, and it's really all you can drink. So once you pay the flat fee in our world with our SIP trunks, it's as many calls as you want to make over that, and all of the long distance is included. So again, you go back to that cryptic bill that you might be getting for your PRI, you have expenses associated with the circuit itself, just the absolute, being able to deliver the connections to your location. You have to pay for the PRI cards and your physical equipment, and then it's just not scalable, right? One thing that I think is worth talking about a little bit more, Dennis, is just the reliability. Typically the folks on this call are probably just with one provider, right? So, that might be AT&T or Logix or CenturyLink, there's a million of them. But what we see is sometimes that provider, well, it's not a question of if, it's when that provider has an outage, right? So how would SIP help these clients with not only reducing the cost, but providing more reliability?
Yeah, absolutely. So typically the process of setting up a SIP trunk it's just a matter of IP addresses, and where those IP addresses will live in are the data centers where the voice network is housed for a lot of these backend providers that are providing SIP services today. So to Aaron's point, to kind of cover you guys from a business continuity perspective and also ensure that you have sufficient redundancy and availability if one carrier happens to go down, there are multiple options for failover. In some cases, that might come through one carrier providing, 2 IP addresses to give you guys geo redundancy, so that, for the best possible latency and quality of service and voice quality, you also have 2 data centers that you're connected into. In other cases, it might also mean, having a aggregate stack of providers in the back end so that there's high availability and 100% uptime. So in the event that, one carrier happens to have a local market impairment, there can be a seamless process of automatically failing over to another provider so that there's no reduction in uptime.
So,
Go ahead.
Go ahead. You go ahead.
Yeah, and most of this is easily facilitated by, setting up a trunk and providing multiple IP addresses. And this can all be done through one circuit. There's no need to install an additional PRI. And this is all mostly facilitated inside the cloud as well.
And so Agility, that's what we do. We have a product called OTT SIP Trunk. So we have multiple providers. So let me give you a story or an example. Yesterday, even though one of our clients had moved to SIP, they're just with AT&T. So if AT&T has a bad day, then they're down, right? So having one provider is risk, even if you're on SIP trunks. They did save a tremendous amount of money. I think it was about 30% of the reoccurring bill was saved moving to SIP, but they had all their eggs in one basket, right? It was really one provider. So with Agility, we have multiple providers and we switch IP addresses to be able to give you more resiliency. So it's more than just reducing costs or having scalability on the fly. It's also about providing more reliability through this technology. So the next question you may be asking yourself, well, this sounds great, but SIP is new. It really, from our perspective and being in the business a long time, we've been moving people to SIP over the last 10 years. So if you haven't heard of it before, it's certainly not something that's bleeding edge or new, but it is, the adoptability has grown dramatically over the last couple of years because I think everybody is interested in using networks to get cost reduction, and especially now. So Dennis, what are some of the risks associated with SIP? I mean, you've moved a lot of clients from traditional PRIs to SIP. Are there risks involved in that?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's important for us to be upfront about some potential caveats when considering a switch for those folks that have done it or are considering it. So just a little bit of history right here. So typically, a lot of the appeal of using a dedicated circuit and kind of segregating it away from the circuit that you use for your broadband or internet connectivity is that it also acts separately. And so in the case that, your internet connection goes down, that means your phone lines are still going. There is a certain level of security that comes with having physical infrastructure. I would also say that another caveat of utilizing SIP connection, while your capacity and your ability to add additional channels is technically unlimited, the soft limiting factor is your available bandwidth. And so it's important to have enterprise-grade broadband, whether that's through a fiber solution or through some other sort of solution as well. Also, there's the added piece of, unless you guys choose to kind of connect to voice services in the cloud via a dedicated circuit, there's also the issue of pushing stuff over the public internet as well. So in some cases, just for security purposes, there might be firewalls that need to be installed or some additional testing. So there are definitely a few more measures that folks need to put into place, and I imagine also Agility kind of considers that in the course of installation as well, to ensure that the solution is ultimately not only scalable, but also secure and resilient.
And that's a good point. I think in today's world, there's not a business out there, whether you have 10 people or 10,000 people, you really want to have multiple forms of internet access coming into your buildings. It's so important to have multiple carriers. If you have Spectrum today, you need another carrier. And then, as y'all know, you can aggregate those carriers together, right, through your networks. So you're using every drop of bandwidth that you're investing in. But if one carrier is having a bad day, you want to set up your network so that it fails over to the other carrier automatically. And I know there's easy ways to do that. There's some carriers today, like Zayo, for example, who has multiple ISPs on the same circuit. So instead of having to have two different providers and two different circuits, you can actually bring in one circuit and have two different ISPs in it. So internet resiliency is really important, not only for SIP trunking and voice communications, but also for just regular data communications. So many of our apps today are in the cloud. So in speed, having the speed and the reliability is important for productivity of your team. So what our team does is we help you analyze your current bills. So what we can do for you today is, if the typical campaign for us is, send us a bill. We've got folks on our team that look at all the cryptic, codes and numbers, and they will provide you with analysis and say, okay, here's what you're paying today. Here, if you did move to Agility's OTT SIP trunks, here's what your cost savings would be, and here's what you would gain. I can tell you, in most cases, it's like cutting your telecom bill in half. It's usually about 50% savings. It could be more, it could be less, depending on how often you evaluate, your bills. But that's something that we do. Obviously, there's no obligation. So if you haven't done that with us, you might want to do that. Please remember that what we're talking about today is you can use these SIP services whether you have a premise-based system, right? You own it. It's a box that you have on site. Or if you move to our we call it Agility on Tap, which is our cloud solution. In the cloud, obviously, we're taking all of the phone system capabilities that you have today, and we're putting in our cloud on our servers and managing that. What does that do for you? It eliminates a lot of risks. And I think you guys have seen these in our environment. And in Dallas, for some of those folks who are in Dallas, you've seen some bad weather storms come in and literally knock out hundreds of businesses. Many of those businesses did not have their phone systems in the cloud, or and have really suffered because they've had a lot of downtime. So I think that's been the impetus for a lot of people to start evaluating cloud, not only to reduce costs, but also to protect against those bad weather storms. In addition, I know in any geography, you guys have, there's hurricanes in Houston and tornadoes all across the United States, and power outages, equipment failures because maybe your equipment is 10 years old or 6 years old, right? And if something happens, just having the reliability of the cloud makes a big difference to your business. So a lot of moving to the cloud is for resiliency, but it can also reduce your cost. And then, your IT team is less burdened with, making sure the servers are updated and moves, adds, and changes. Those are things that Agility handles for our clients. So I think most of you on this call, if you're not on SIP today, you may want to evaluate it. We know it will reduce your costs and put you into today's technology that's more reliable.
Absolutely, and I would also add that now, given the present circumstances, and especially just looking at a shift in the market towards more, unified communication platform, cloud communication platforms, more consolidated communication infrastructure, and especially with more folks doing work from home. Even in particular, this Avaya meeting conference room, which is largely being facilitated by numbers that are housed inside of it and IP-based voice infrastructure. More than ever, it's just to ensure that you guys can remotely engage with your customer base, and also just ensure that your entire operations is able to stay in contact and ensure mission-critical communications. SIP is definitely positioned in a way to help facilitate that moving forward.
So we're at the end of part one. So I see some questions coming in, but keep them coming. So part one, remember, is really focused on SIP and why you should be evaluating. If you have questions, put them in the chat window, and we will get to them as they come in. So we've got a question here. Dennis, we can talk about this. The question is, can SIP be used simultaneously with a carrier service? Absolutely, great question. So go ahead.
Yep, I would say that there are definitely hybrid PRI and hybrid SIP solutions out there, and definitely, how you guys choose to tailor that is how you. It's entirely up to you. I think most of the limitations around that usually is around the PBX that you guys are currently utilizing, and if it has the flexibility to do an IP interconnect and frankly connect to the public internet. If that is the case, it can also set up a PRI circuit as well. Then yeah, you guys can have a flexible voice solution there.
Yeah, and I think probably some of these folks, let's just say they're with AT&T or whoever they're with, and they have a PRI today. For a lot of our customers, they may still be in a contract with this older technology, but they still want the resiliency of SIP. So in that case, what you can do is essentially set up programming so that if the AT&T PRI is down, then that traffic can fail over to the SIP infrastructure that Agility is providing you. And then over time, you would probably migrate off of the older PRI. Just people aren't using them anymore, and it doesn't make sense to keep that around, right? So when the contract's up, that's what you would do. So even if that, AT&T circuit is down, your folks are still able to make outbound calls through SIP as well as receive inbound calls. So most of the providers have a portal that you can go to and pre-program, this disaster routing capability so that it happens automatically. But I can tell you, I've been around 25 years. As much effort as you put into this, there are still issues, right? So I would say most of the time that auto reroute works. I've seen it not work. So in my opinion, in looking at this stuff, the big telcos are really hard to work with, as y'all know, and you're treated like a very small fish in a big pond. So I think with Agility, our value is helping you navigate that and build in resiliency and put you on this technology that's going to give you what you want and reduce your costs. So to answer your question, Brad Davis, the answer is yes. So if you need more specifics, then please let us know. Are there any more questions on part one for SIP trunking, why it's valuable, why you may need to consider it? Okay, well, Dennis, thank you. We appreciate it. We're going to move to part two, which is what I can tell you at Agility for the last 4 or 5 weeks. All we've been doing is helping customers, set up remote users through apps that we have available, and also talking to them about free collaboration rooms. So what I wanted to do, and some of our clients had these things already in place, and some of them needed to get them quickly. For our cloud clients, it's great because when you're on the cloud, if you want to turn up an application, that literally takes us minutes or days versus planning for the infrastructure if you're still in a premise-based mode. Some of our customers still have premise-based systems, but they have maybe 40 people that need to work remote. So we've actually been able to do a hybrid. So they have some users that are still on their premise-based phone system. And then what we were able to do is put the remote users in the cloud, right? Because they needed this stuff, they needed it spun up in days and not weeks. And then we were able to connect the cloud users to the premise-based system as if they're on the same system. So we've seen a lot of customers do that for their contact centers, or maybe it's an executive team or sales folks. You're able to have that flexibility. You don't have to move everything to the cloud if you're not ready to do that. So again, for remote users, what I wanted to kind of talk to you today is obviously with shelter in place, your workers can't get to your physical building. So you may want to have, you can obviously with IP phones, you can take those home, you can plug them in and they will work. That is probably something that we did, 10 years ago. Today, everything's really software based. And what I wanted to do today was to show you some of these interfaces just so you could see what people are doing and why, and how it's easier than the traditional physical phone. So I wanted to show you what we're doing for most of our customers. Want to make sure you guys can see that. Seth, can you confirm that you can see the IX Workplace client?
Confirmed.
Thank you. Okay. So yeah, so we're moving to software, and I don't know if your organizations have moved to soft phones yet, but this is a really amazing app called IX Workplace. What we love about it is essentially, I'm a Mac user. You can probably tell that from my screen, right? And I use an iPhone, very big into Apple products. But this particular piece of software runs on any OS. So whether you have Windows or Mac or Android or iPhone, it works the same way on every type of device you have. And the cool thing about it is, from a user perspective, you don't have to learn a different type of user interface if you're on your smartphone versus your desktop. And for Agility folks, we've rolled this out to our sales team. They typically work at home. We got away from physical phones about 10 years ago, so they all use this piece of software. They install it on all their devices, and they are able to work from anywhere, and they have been for years. And then we track all of that. So we track every call they make. We can record every call they make. And we look at those metrics, and that helps us judge productivity, helps people move in the right direction when they need to have more productivity. And then we can see and track everything with accountability through these applications. I wanted to point out just a couple things that make this easy. So you don't need a physical phone. You may be thinking, well, I don't know if my company is ready to move to all software. Maybe you already have a bunch of physical phones, which is fine. This works in conjunction with a physical phone. So if you were in the office and you wanted to use AGS Workplace, it would just control your physical phone, or it can work as a phone by itself. And the nice thing about this is, this tool basically takes all your information, whether you're using G Suite or Office 365, which I think most of you guys are using one of the two of those, and puts it into this nice little app. So you may be asking yourself, I already use Outlook for my meetings, right? Or some sort of calendar through G Suite. Why do I need this on this app? Well, what this helps you do is there's little icons here. So for whatever meeting you've got scheduled on your calendar, there's an icon. So instead of having to, if you're driving down the road, instead of having to pull over and dial in and put in all these codes and pound signs and hashes and things like that, you can just one-click tap onto these icons, and it takes you right into your meeting. So if you're somebody like me who's in meetings half the day, then it makes it really easy to get to where you need to be. And if you're in an airport or you're traveling, you can just tap in through these icons. It's as easy as that. So you have your calendars here, but it also synchronizes all your contacts. So some of you out there might have, 5,000 contacts in Outlook or however you keep track of them. Through this interface, I can punch in anybody's name, right? And then I can call them from my cell phone, but it projects my professional image. So instead of calling from a personal number and it says Aaron Welton, it says Agility Communications Group. Obviously, that call is tracked and can be recorded as well, right? So all of your contact informations are easily accessible, whether they're in your personal contacts or just an enterprise contact. You can easily find them here and call folks. And then you can also see presence. So you guys might have discovered this working from home. It really is important. Like right now, I'm in Do Not Disturb, right? Because I don't want my phone ringing or people interrupting what I'm doing. So all of those settings can change here with the presence setting, and then it shows up to your colleagues through these messages. But there's also a favorites place. So when I'm about to call someone or I need to instant message them, I typically go to my favorites, and I can see their presence, whether they're in a meeting, on the phone. All of that information is shown here. So when you are remote or you're working from home, that information is really valuable so that you can get your questions answered quickly. As you'd imagine, you have your call history here, so you can see here it's just one tap back. It's very easy to call folks back, whether they're part of your organization or not. And then it's also got instant messaging. So some of you on the call may be saying, hey, that's great. We already have an instant messaging client through another type of company. That's fine. You can actually, the look and feel of this can all be modified. So you could actually remove the messages if you wanted to, which is the instant messaging. Or what you could do is when you set up this client, you could say, hey, we're going to be using Microsoft for instant messaging, right? So you can still use this client while integrating with Teams or other types of software that you use. So this is really the client. People find it to be really easy to use. The form factor, as you can see here, is a rectangle. It looks identical on your cell phone as on any other device. So one last thing I want to point out here is on the bottom, phone systems are doing a lot more today than just making and receiving calls. You're seeing presence information and some messaging. But now as people work from home, and you guys see this because you're probably on these Zoom meetings with your grandparents and your family members, cousins, friends, right? I'm sure most of you are on Zoom meetings or WebEx meetings or GoToMeetings or maybe just FaceTime at night, connecting with folks as we're all living and working in our homes. So what's happening with businesses is collaboration rooms are really important too. And most businesses have, something, but they usually don't have a collaboration room built in for every user, right? You usually share a GoToMeeting account. Sometimes it's expensive, WebEx, GoToMeeting, and you share an account and you have to, there's scheduling issues, et cetera. So with this particular app, there's built-in collaboration rooms that are free for every user. So kind of like the collaboration room we're in today, and you can access it really easily. So you don't have to, be sharing someone's login and password for some GoToMeeting room. You can just do it right from here. You click into Spaces, and once you do that, it puts you into a room, okay? And remember, everybody in your company will have their own Spaces room. And in these rooms, just like if you were in a Zoom room, I know a lot of you guys have been doing that at night, you have video capabilities, you can screen share, you can record, you can invite guests, and these rooms are highly scalable. So even the basic room, there's 3 tiers, starts at 50 people can be in the room, and that's free. So if you wanted to have a big conference call, you can have 50 folks in there. As you move up in the tiers, obviously there's more capacity, so it goes from 50 users to 200 to 500 users. And then the capabilities get more as far as video too. So today we've got video on the call. Tier 1 does not include video. Tier 2 goes to 15 users, and then Tier 3 is 35 users of video. So most of you are probably going to be in that Tier 2 if you want to see people. Then you can record these meetings. One thing that makes this tool a little bit different than other tools you may have used in the past is you can create a space for whatever type of meeting you're having. So instead of just using the same generic meeting space for every type of meeting, most of you probably have projects that you're working on, or maybe you have an operational team or a sales team. You may want to create different spaces for each type of meeting that you have. A lot of businesses have these same meetings every week, right? 9 o'clock on Mondays, we're going to have a sales team meeting. So when you go into your room and in your space, it says sales team. And the nice thing about these rooms is you have, not only can you share things and see people, but you can also have persistent chat, file sharing, and task assignments. So how many times have you been in a meeting? You can tell probably I run a lot of meetings, and we're talking about a lot of ideas, and we're making sure that folks are moving forward with those ideas. And what we found to be really valuable is to create tasks for that, and then we assign those tasks to the people that are responsible for doing them. So since we're meeting every week in the same room, we go back and we can see the tasks from last week. It's kind of like our to-do list, and then we can cross out the things that get done and drive more accountability wherever these folks are, right? So this has been a really great tool that's, as you can see, highly scalable. Everybody's got their own rooms. Every team has their own rooms, and it drives accountability with those tasks. So I know right now, I think some of the team was telling me this morning that Avaya is giving these rooms away for free, so for 60 days. So and they don't cost that much, even if you want to keep it for the long term. But if you've got folks working at home today, and you just need a solution that you can put in place for a couple months, and this may be something you would want to consider. This also ties in, these meeting rooms tie back into that IX workplace. So when you do set up a Spaces meeting, like I showed you before, there's a little Spaces icon, so you can just tap in. And for those of you who use Teams, perhaps there's an Avaya Assistant app that you can just plug into your Teams, and that can take you right to your Teams room as well, or excuse me, your Spaces room. So Avaya does have connections to a lot of the other products out there. Slack is another one I know a lot of you guys use, right? So there's plugins that you can use with Slack and Teams to be able to talk to not only your Spaces rooms, but also your contacts in your Avaya IX Workplace app. So, I hear a lot of the questions I get is like, why should we make these investments? We don't want our people working from home long term. I get it. I understand that. But I guess I would say that, the things I think you should consider are, your people may not work at home long term, but you may still have cases where there's bad weather. There could be storms coming through, hurricanes, power outages, equipment failures, all sorts of things that will drive you to having people perhaps work at home or wherever they happen to be beyond just the current circumstance. So in our case, I wanted to share a quick story. And this was about 10 years ago. We had an amazing employee that said, hey, we're going to move to San Antonio. And at that time, we didn't have an office in San Antonio. And so we said, let's try this experiment. Let's have you work from home. We didn't have anybody working from home 10 years ago. And let's just see if it works. So obviously it was a success. The employee's still with us today. And an amazing, for those of you, it's Matthew. I don't know if you know our support team, but if you do, it's him. And he actually was a pioneer of people working from home. And what we've done as a business is we've put together accountability through tools and metrics to make sure that remote employee feels connected to the teams and the company as a whole. So as you guys are probably discovering, you do need to have more meetings. They need to be more frequently, and you've got to have metrics in place in the background that track what these folks are doing. But these two tools, I think, will help you get there, even if you need stuff for the short term. Spaces is available. But I would argue there's probably some reasons why you might need IX Workplace for the long term as well. So this is what our teams work on every day. If you need help with any of this, we're here to help you. And this is really the end of part 2. So if you guys have questions on this, I'll give you a minute or so to put them in the chat window. Okay, I don't see anything. So if you need help, if any of this is interest to you or you want to explore more, I think most of you know how to get in touch with us. Just respond to the invitation or talk to your account team. Send us a note. We'll be glad to help. We really appreciate you joining, and be safe. Bye-bye.